Even in households in India, we struggle to have conversations about money. In many households, the idea of the girl having her own bank account and her own investments is a big deal. Now, if you're married into a household like that and that is not in line with your values, I think you need to have some conversations about this. Most couples don't even know their monthly income and monthly expenses. When you get into a startup, very often people don't realize it's going to have a meaningful impact on the family's finances, financial situation. The reality is what families do is whatever is needed in that situation.
Right.
You know, when life is at stake, there is no your money, my money.
Correct.
It can't be. Human life is at stake.
You know, growing up with Bollywood and being in the industry myself, the idea that love overcomes all is a very romanticized idea. I remember in my first film where, it was called Alai Paide with Mani Ratnam. And, I was a software engineer at that point of time, doing a startup. This is in 2000.
Cool.
Very progressive storytelling at that point of time. And then we were very sure that love conquers all and money is not going to be a factor in it. And eventually how it comes down to just that by the end of the film was one of the things. What is your favorite movie scene? Do you remember any which sells this idea?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, I don't know if you remember this movie in the 90s called Akele Hum Akele.
Akele, of course, yeah.
Manisha and Amir get married, then they've rebelled against their parents and they're so excited that they've gotten married. And then the reality of life starts kicking in and the differences in economic equations start kicking in because love is important. But
Right.
finally, economics is an important part of life and it starts kicking in after marriage and you see what happens in that movie.
Yeah, and a lot of Hindi films where for the sake of love, the heroine is in love with either somebody way lower than even in their financial or educational strata, and then you believe that love will conquer all, and then how it doesn't sometimes.
Because life shows up.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I wanted to ask you, why do we refrain from talking about money in our relationships? Is it because it leads to ego tussles? Is it because it's considered to be impolite or inquisitive? What is the reason, do you think?
And I think it's a combination of factors, and I don't think it's just in romantic relationships. Even in households in India, we struggle to have conversations about money. I think in my own family, I've seen that whenever there's a money conversation that's a little uncomfortable,
Right.
we skirt around the topic.
Especially asking the दामाद कि भाई आप कितने कमाते हो?
आप कितना कमाते हो? या जैसे अब property का division होता है and there is two siblings.
Yeah.
There's always a little like, why are you giving this one this much? Why are you giving that one? So it's a combination of it being forbidden territory. I don't know why forbidden territory, seeming rude, this element of ego, trust. You're questioning my trust.
Right.
How could you ask me that? And it's very unfortunate because most problems in life come because you don't have conversations, and money problems certainly come because you don't have conversations.
Correct. And I think a change in attitude is required where you ask those questions with respect and with humility, but make sure you ask those questions. Assuming has become one of the biggest dangers in my opinion.
I think so. And, many girls write messages to me. And, one of the most common pieces of advice, and you'd think career women asking me advice, ask me about career advice. They actually ask me about what kind of guy they should marry. It's a very common question.
Wow.
And
girl talk.
And I keep telling them, have a conversation about money before. At least not who's going to pay for what, but what are your money values, right?
Correct.
And for instance, in many households, the idea of the girl having her own bank account and her own investments is a big deal. Now, if you're married into a household like that and that is not in line with your values, I think you need to have some conversations about this. Are we going to do joint? What is our principle?
Exactly. I think it's very, very important because I come from a family that was a double income family way back in 1970s. My mother was working for Bank of India. My father was working for Tata Steel. Almost equal salaries, right? There weren't any defined rules about who should be spending for what.
Yeah.
We of course had the privilege of being a double income family, so the holidays were better and maybe the flights were a little more frequent than the others. But I distinctly remember the discord in the family when my father was like, I'll pay for these things, but these I'm not going to pay for because I can't afford it. I have to make sure that I stay in line, and I assume that I'm going to be the single income family household lifestyle for the rest of my life because what you're earning is the bonus. And I'm sure he had a way of looking at it, and I'm sure the mother was like, when we can afford it, why are we not living now? When are we going to live? And all those conversations. But I think in today's world, that's far more frequent. And I really think what you said about having a direct heart-to-heart conversation about how the monies will be spent by whom and for what is very, very important. The moment anyone wants to talk about marriage, the first piece of gyan that comes in is about compromise.
Yeah.
But Radhika, I want to ask you about the non-negotiables. What are the 3 or 4 financial things that couples absolutely need to be on the same page on? It's like saying, okay, you can do whatever you want with your money, provided we're all aligned on A, B, C, D.
I think one is the fundamental principle of ownership, and this is a difficult thing to say, but are we going to have individual bank accounts? If both are earning, right? If both are earning, are we going to have individual bank accounts and are expenses going to be common, or is it one fungible pool? This is an easy thing to say, but it's a hard thing to
hard decision to come to.
Hard decision to come to. So I think someone needs to have that. Are we going to have common ownership of investments? Like when we buy a house, are both of us going to fund it?
What is your opinion on that? I'm sorry, I don't want to pry, but I'm just saying, what do you think?
My opinion is, it's not radical. I think people should have equal ownership, but I also come from a place, we are a double income, equal income kind of household. So I can have the privilege of saying these things, right? Now, not every household is a double income household. Not every household is an equal double income household, Madhavan. So, but my certain opinion of it is you should have the conversation, right? In fact, in my husband and my case, we actually have a joint investment plan and we write down our money values. What kind of investments we are comfortable making, what kind of investments we are not comfortable making, how do we think about expenses, how do we budget? We actually write down our plan and we review it every year.
Wow. Actually, it's the kind of conversations that have probably never been had before between couples and essential right now. It's amazing. Have you ever discovered any surprising financial quirks in your partner over the course of your marriage?
Oh, he's a Nazi. Like, he has every expense that I have made or that he has made in the household written down and documented in a spreadsheet. So you will know how much money I spend on clothes at the end of every, and he just does it for accounting, just for clarity of purpose, because we keep separate accounts. But he has everything written down. He is the most organized human being on planet Earth.
Wow. That must be extremely satisfying, encouraging, and exasperating at some times.
It's more useful than exasperating because it leaves me less work, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
He also, when he meets a person, writes down their kids' names in his iPhone directory.
Oh my God.
So that when he meets them again, he asks them the kids' names.
How nice that is.
And they're very impressed by him.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So it's wonderful to be like that, I think, and it's. I would love to be in the company of somebody who takes notes of everything that I do in my life, to keep track of it. But for people who don't do that, who live by the, who are not capable of doing that, a lot of couples are not capable of doing that. It's one of the things that I would like to say, for instance, is that if you're going to just keep a generic outlook into what you're doing, then it's very important to make sure that you don't not plan at all. That's one of the things that people think is also not required. Planning is essential. So Sarita and I live that. I don't keep account of everything. I don't keep, but I know generally ballpark of where we are. And if we're spending a little more than what would be comfortable, assuming that this is going to be my income for the next 10 years. So those kind of general planning is important because most couples don't even know how to plan. No.
Yeah, most couples don't even know their monthly income and monthly expenses.
And the whole point of this conversation is to know how to plan that. So if you have as much expertise about investments as you and your husband do, it's one thing. If you don't, if you do not even know what these words mean, you still have to have a life and plan, right? For that, I think it's very, very important to know where you stand, what your likely income is going to be, and stay well below it. So that you know that is the darja with which you can, and the bandwidth in which you can oscillate and function.
I always tell couples know 3 things. Approximately what are your annual expenses and break them down monthly. Approximately what are your annual incomes and what are your major 5-year goals.
Right.
And if you do that, you can do your planning. And by the way, there's a lot of financial advice and help out there. You can actually take this to someone and have them craft a plan, even if you don't know how to do this.
Exactly the point of this interview. The reason I'm having this conversation is a lot of people would find the terms we sometimes use, almost Greek and Latin,
Yeah.
right? But to know that you have to do this
Yeah.
is to go to somebody you trust and say, hey, I heard this.
Yeah.
Tell me what it means. I know I'm smart enough to understand it's essential, but what does it mean and how do I go about it? And there are many people who are actually out there willing to help you do this. Radhika, I want to ask you about the differences that come up when you start combining finances. Let's say I am an FD guy, but my wife is into Bitcoin, NFT, and stuff, right? Neither of us want to put money in other people's preferred investments. How do you find the middle ground?
So either you find the middle ground or you don't. And in India, you actually get this Bitcoin and FD dichotomy quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the problem is that, when it's going well, it is. But say you invested and everybody feels their money, rightly so, is very hard earned and it's theirs. Now, when things are going well, as I said, they go well. But when you invest in Bitcoin, if you are an FD guy and your wife has told you to invest your money in Bitcoin, if it goes wrong, believe me, you're going to hear, I told you so. And it starts becoming very, very...
Oh, yes. It creeps in more from financial and moves into personal decision.
Ugly.
Yeah, it's ugly. Yeah.
There's no better word for
Yeah.
it. I think the solution is either you agree to disagree, in which case you do your FD and I do my Bitcoin, or you actually write down what your middle path is. And maybe there's another way to do it. You can say there's some investments. I always believe, Madhavan, life is 80-20, right? 80% of the investments are family investments, and those we'll do in a vanilla thing,
Correct.
like my good old mutual fund. 20% each of you do what you want to have your fun. So you do your FD and I do my Bitcoin.
Correct.
But again, having that conversation, identifying what is going to be common and what that middle path is. And I really encourage everyone, write it down. It prevents fights when things go wrong.
And here's another follow-up question to that. Another reason that I can think is when you get married, both of you have stable salaried careers. Then one day your partner talks about quitting his job or her job and getting into a startup. So only one of you will have a stable income. How do you approach a situation like this?
It's very personal, but at the minimum, you should talk about it. So I think even when people, and I've been an entrepreneur, when you get into a startup, very often people don't realize it's going to have a meaningful impact on the family's finances, financial situation, even the way people think. So having that conversation with your partner when you're in the thinking stage, that I am going to do a startup, I may be taking a career break, I need your financial support. And, in a marriage, Madhavan, sometimes someone does less, sometimes someone does more. I mean, these are realities of life. But I think having that conversation, because the next thing you know, the startup person has no income for 3 years, but sells his startup for $1 billion. I mean, all these stories happen.
Yeah.
Narayan Murthy has talked about how Sudha Murthy supported him in the building
But
of
these
Infosys.
unicorns are exactly that. They're unicorns.
So, I
It's
mean,
as rare as that, right?
and then there was a stable partner who helped you while you were going out and building that. So I think having the conversation and having that element of trust is all you can really do.
I agree.
You can't say I'm going to ditch you because you're doing a startup.
Yeah. And and making your partner a part of that dream and understanding the risks involved and being mature and honest about it. Well, so that people don't get shocks while they're, transiting.
And being grateful if it goes well, yeah.
Yeah, of course. I think that's very sound advice. That's absolutely true. I think we come back over and over again to the fact that we need to have open conversations almost about everything, right? Finally, Radhika, what happens when there is, God forbid, an unexpected medical expense? Maybe it's not one of you, maybe it's a close family, a relative. Sometimes treatments can wipe you off, and you don't want to have that on your soul. So what plans can you make as a couple to navigate this?
I mean, the real answer is you plan insurance in advance, right?
Yeah.
At the moment when the event happens and you haven't got insurance, the reality is what families do is whatever is needed in that situation.
Right.
When life is at stake, there is no your money, my money.
Correct.
It can't be. Human life is at stake. But
Yeah.
the important thing to realize, as you said, is that healthcare costs are going up. For all the family members, how do you create adequate life cover? And we are not just responsible for ourselves and our partner and our children. We are responsible for our parents and, family members. So making sure that people have the right life cover. So like in my case, my father works with government, so they have government cover. My husband's family doesn't. So we've made sure there is life cover. So just making sure that you do this planned in advance so that you don't have to deal with this is probably the right answer.
Oh yes, it is true. This is what we've been trying to harp for the longest time, and the importance of it. To be shocked for a medical expense at a wrong turn in your life can really like throw you off completely. But thank you so much for coming again, for all the wise words, I would say. I'm sure it's a great insight into how to live in today's world and plan financially for your future. I have to say that was a complete pleasure talking to you, Radhika. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.